Elara Vance was not a woman who believed in miracles, but she believed in structure. She believed in the precise, measurable transformation that careful planning and sheer force of will could achieve. She stood on the wraparound porch of the Blackwood estate, holding a chipped porcelain mug, the faint steam from her coffee mirroring the soft mist lifting from Willowbrook Lake. It was the quiet of this place that was the true balm. For 8 relentless months, this magnificent Queen Anne Victorian, her great-aunt Cordelia's legacy, had been the sole focus of her existence. Every plank replaced, every leaded glass windowpane polished, every crumbling section of gingerbread trim recreated by her own hands. At 48, Elara had lost her marriage, her business partnership, and almost her entire life savings in a messy, public divorce. This house, this 3-story monument of late 19th century optimism, was the blueprint for her second chance. She inhaled deeply. The air was a clean, sharp mix of pine, lake water, and the faint, satisfying scent of the final coat of exterior paint, a historically accurate pale grey-blue she'd sourced from a specialty mill. The sounds, the distant, haunting call of the loons, the gentle lap of the water against the shore, were the soundtrack of pure, unadulterated, hard-earned peace. 8 months. And not a single screw-up on the ledger, Elara murmured to herself, a rare moment of self-congratulation. As an architectural preservationist, she specialized in the history of materials, the bones of a structure. She'd meticulously adhered to every historical code and every modern safety regulation, obtaining every necessary permit from the reluctant, small-town bureaucracy. She had anticipated every structural nightmare, but never the human one. I remember walking in here the first day. The air was thick with mold and despair. Raccoons staring back at me from the shadows. Everyone told me to tear it down. Too far gone, Elara. But I saw the pattern in the decay, the narrative of the original builder. The rot was just neglect, not failure. I was restoring the house, yes, but more truthfully, I was restoring myself. Every hammered nail, every sanded floorboard, was a rejection of the past 2 years of betrayal and loss. I had control here. And control, after chaos, is everything. The silence was shattered, not by a crash, but by a sound far more sinister in this quiet community, the smug, self-important crunch of expensive tires on gravel. A silver Lexus SUV, polished to an obnoxious gleam, glided to a halt. It didn't belong. Its presence was too assertive, too clean against the rustic, honest dirt of the driveway. Out stepped a woman who looked like a walking blueprint for privilege. Delilah Cross. Mid-50s, with the kind of rigid, high-maintenance blonde bob that suggested no strand was ever out of place. Her smile was wide, fixed, and professionally devoid of genuine emotion, the smile of a politician or a high-end estate agent. She wore pristine white linen trousers and a tailored navy blazer, an outfit designed to project casual authority. Delilah didn't bother with the driveway steps. She marched across the lawn, her expensive Italian leather flats sinking slightly into the freshly mowed grass. "Ms. Vance." "What a charming reconstruction," Delilah announced, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry across the water, a theatrical performance for the unseen neighbors. She didn't wait for a response, advancing right to the porch railing. "I'm Delilah Cross, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. And I must say, the grey is bold." Elara set her mug down, the gentle rhythm of her morning instantly disrupted. She felt the familiar, protective tension rise in her chest. "The color is historically accurate to 1923, Mrs. Cross. And with all due respect, I researched the deed extensively. The Blackwood estate is not part of any HOA." Delilah chuckled, a dry, brittle sound that was meant to convey superior knowledge. She reached into a designer handbag and produced a thick, official-looking manila folder, laminated with seals. "Oh, sweetie. Sometimes these older properties simply lack proper documentation. It's an oversight, a loophole we're here to close." Delilah didn't hand the folder over, she placed it on the railing, forcing Elara to walk forward and take it. The weight of the paper felt like lead in Elara's hands. Inside was a demand for payment that instantly sucked the air from the morning. The header read, "Past due assessments and interest." The figure was staggering, $47,382. The accompanying letter detailed the claim, back HOA dues and penalties, accruing since 1975, the year the Willowbrook Estates HOA was allegedly formed. A monthly fee of $350 was also demanded, payable immediately. $47,000. It's impossible. It's an extortion. I spent every last dime of my retirement fund, the one I protected through the divorce, on the structural integrity of this house. This bill represents my entire safety net, my seed money for the firm. She knows that. This isn't a bill. This is a weapon designed to collapse my financial structure, to make me fail right here, right now. Elara's professional composure, honed over decades of negotiating tense construction meetings, clicked into place. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was low and dangerously measured. This document is erroneous, Mrs. Cross. My title insurance company ran a full title search. There are no covenants, conditions, or restrictions, CC and RS, on this property requiring HOA membership. This estate is pre-existing. Delilah's eyes, cold, blue, and utterly unsympathetic, narrowed slightly. The Willowbrook Estates community, Ms. Vance, operates under the principle of implied membership. The benefit of the communal lake access, the shared aesthetic standard, it's implied you are a member. Implied membership does not equate to a lienable debt, Elara countered, remembering the legalese from her building contract days. I need to see the original recorded document placing this property under the HOA's jurisdiction. The date, the volume, and the page number. Delilah laughed, a genuinely dismissive, high-pitched sound. You sound like a lawyer, dear. How tedious. Look, the Blackwood estate has been a neglected eyesore for 50 years. Our property values have suffered. We were simply being generous, allowing your late aunt to live out her days. Now that you've improved the house, you're enjoying our standards. And standards come with a price. She looked pointedly at Elara's dusty jeans and paint-stained t-shirt, the uniform of a working woman, not a leisure-class neighbor. The 30 days starts now. Pay the back dues or face a formal lien and foreclosure proceedings. Welcome to Willowbrook. Delilah didn't wait for a reply. She turned, walking back to her Lexus, her posture radiating success and victory. The SUV peeled out, spitting gravel onto the meticulously manicured lawn. Elara stood immobile on her porch, the heavy folder weighing down her hands. The peace was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. The sun, now higher, caught the pristine white trim of the house, a testament to Elara's dedication. But all she could see was the shadow cast by Delilah's demand. It was a perfect piece of psychological warfare, hit her where she was most vulnerable, her financial stability, and leveraged the community's fear of outsiders. Delilah hadn't just given her a bill, she had challenged Elara's fundamental right to belong and to rebuild her life. Elara spent the next 72 hours in a deep dive, working through the night. Her coffee mug was refilled countless times, the Blackwood estate's original blueprints spread out alongside property law documents. She called her previous attorney, the one who'd handled her bitter divorce, but he specialized in family law, not property litigation. She needed a specialist, and specialists cost money she no longer had. Her phone rang, shattering the intense silence of the study. It was Bertie Kowalski, the retired town librarian and local history expert, who had stopped by occasionally during the renovation with advice and baked goods. You had a visitor, dear, Bertie's voice crackled over the phone, dry as parchment but sharp as a newly sharpened pencil. Delilah and her fancy car. I saw her from my porch down the road. Elara explained the $47,000 demand. Bertie was silent for a long moment. Then, she released a single, hard sigh. The Petons. It's always the Petons. Harold Peton, Delilah's father, founded the HOA back in '75. They've been using it to control this entire side of the lake ever since. They target the easy ones, the elderly, the financially strained newcomers. But why the Blackwood estate? Elara asked, running a finger over Cordelia's signature on the old title transfer. We have the cleanest, oldest deed in the county. Exactly, Bertie said, her voice dropping conspiratorially. Your great-aunt Cordelia, she was a fighter. She was the only one who ever stood up to Harold Peton. I remember the rumors back then. He couldn't force her into the HO. There was a legal skirmish. Harold backed down. Backed down how? He gave her an exclusion, Bertie revealed. I don't remember the document's name, but I remember seeing it filed. The Blackwood estate was specifically exempt from the CC and RS due to its pre-existing historical status and a legal settlement. It's buried in the archives, Elara. But if it exists, Delilah knows it exists. And she's betting you can't find it. Bertie's call was a lifeline. Elara wasn't just fighting a bill, she was fighting a cover-up. She had an ally, a clue, and a clear purpose: find the Perpetual Exemption, the lost document that proves Delilah's entire claim is a fraud. The fight had shifted. It was no longer about restoring a building, It was about exposing the rotten foundation of power in Willowbrook. Elara had 30 days to find a single, misfiled piece of paper from 50 years ago. A paper that could save her home, expose a dynasty of petty tyranny, and finally bring true peace to the Blackwood estate. The research had begun. The 30-day countdown Delilah Cross had imposed felt like a timer set on a bomb. Elara Vance knew she couldn't afford to let the initial shock paralyze her. Delilah's demand wasn't a negotiation, it was a test of willpower, a legal and psychological maneuver designed to break a newcomer before she could even unpack. 3 days after Delilah's driveway theatrics, the stakes were officially raised. A stern, uniformed courier delivered a heavy, sealed envelope. This wasn't the slick, designer folder from before. This was official correspondence, marked certified mail and bearing the ominous stamp of a collection agency favored by the HOA. The contents were a formal notice of intent to place Lien, detailing the exact legal steps the HOA intended to take to seize Elara's property. The document was laced with jargon about equitable servitude, unjust enrichment, and foreclosure without judicial proceeding, phrases designed to terrify any homeowner into immediate compliance. She wants me to panic. She wants me to see the lawyer's fees piling up and surrender before the fight even begins. This is classic bullying, maximize the cost of opposition. But I was an architect for 20 years. I know how to read a structural defect. The biggest defect in Delilah's plan is that she's relying entirely on intimidation, not fact. My property is sound. Her claim is fraudulent. I just need to find the structural flaw in her own foundation. Elara was ready to toss the letter aside, but a folded enclosure caught her eye. It was a carbon copy of the full demand letter, addressed to the neighbors. It included a handwritten, seemingly casual postscript, signed by Delilah herself. Kindly excuse this formal notice. Ms. Vance is currently experiencing severe financial difficulty and personal upheaval, making the collection process regrettably necessary. Elara's breath hitched. This wasn't just debt collection, this was a smear campaign. Delilah wasn't content to fight Elara in the courts. She was attacking her reputation in the community, leveraging the very public nature of Elara's recent divorce to discredit her and ensure she remained an outsider. This act of malice ignited a cold, focused fury in Elara. She crumpled the copy of the smear note, the sound a sharp, satisfying crunch. You just made this personal, Delilah, she muttered. And I know how to build something that lasts, and I know how to tear down something rotten. The next 2 days were spent in the suffocating silence of the County Register of Deeds office, a mausoleum of bureaucracy that smelled perpetually of dry paper and stale coffee. This was Elara's domain, the archives. It was where the true, unvarnished history of the land lay buried. The county clerk, a tired man named Mr. Henderson, looked at Elara with pitying eyes. You're fighting the HOA, aren't you? Nobody wins against the Petons. Elara ignored the prophecy of doom and plunged into the microfiche room. Her architect's training proved invaluable. Where a lawyer sees text, Elara saw layers of documentation. She didn't just look up the Blackwood estate's current deed, she traced the chain of title back to the original 1923 patent. She then focused on 1975, the year Delilah's father, Harold Peton, had formed the HOA. She needed the Articles of Incorporation, the blueprint for Delilah's power structure. Hour after excruciating hour, Elara cranked the microfiche viewer, the dry scratch of the film spooling the soundtrack to her desperation. She endured the dizzying blur of cursive script and archaic legal formatting. Finally, she found it. 1975, Volume 18, page 402, Articles of Incorporation of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. The document was faded but clear. There were the Peton family names, the initial members, and the statement of purpose, to maintain communal property and preserve aesthetic harmony. Elara felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the foundation. She traced the long list of parcels included in the CC and RS. And there, under a dense section of exclusions, was the first concrete piece of evidence. Excluding the original Blackwood homestead parcel, PID the 23rd of November, 04, due to pre-existing covenants and the owner's refusal to accept mandatory membership. It wasn't the final, ironclad perpetual exemption Birdie had mentioned, but it was a smoking gun. The original HOA knew the Blackwood estate was excluded and recorded that fact. Delilah's claim of implied membership was an outright lie. Elara paid $5 to get a certified, stamped copy. The exhilaration of the discovery was powerful. She had found the first structural weakness in Delilah's grand scheme. As Elara gathered her files, a small figure appeared beside her, startling her. It was Birdie Kowalski. That's a nice bit of work, dear, Birdie said, peering over her glasses at the 1975 document. You found the initial exclusion. But that wasn't enough for Harold. He needed to make sure your Aunt Cordelia never challenged him again. Birdie led Elara to a different section of the archives, not the property deeds, but the historical zoning and landmark preservation records. Harold Peaton was a shrewd man, Birdie explained, her voice lowered to a confidential whisper. Cordelia was going to sue him, not just over the forced membership, but over a minor financial irregularity she found when examining the HOA's starting budget. Harold didn't want the scandal. Birdie pointed to a thin folder dated 1978. He had his lawyer file the final settlement, the Perpetual Exemption, under a completely separate, obscure category. He disguised it as a preservation and access agreement, linking the exclusion to the Blackwood estate's historical status. He buried it so deep, even a diligent title search would miss it. Elara's mind, the architect's mind, clicked. She hadn't been looking for a property law document, she was looking for a historical filing. Delilah was betting on Elara looking in the wrong section, trapped by legal protocol. Elara and Birdie spent the next 2 hours searching that category. It was slow, tedious work through documents about old stone bridges and forgotten farm silos. Then, Birdie cried out softly, "Here it is, Elara. 1978, Perpetual Exemption status." The document confirmed everything. Due to a legal settlement, the Blackwood estate was forever exempt from all dues, fees, and compliance requirements of the Willowbrook Estates HOA. It was signed by both Cordelia Blackwood and, crucially, Harold Peaton. Elara felt a powerful, cleansing wave of vindication wash over her. Not only was the Lien fraudulent, but the foundation of Delilah's claim was built on a lie her own father had signed away decades ago. She had found the ultimate counterweapon. The moment Elara returned home with the certified copies, Delilah launched her biggest social attack. A flyer was delivered to every mailbox, emergency town hall meeting. The stated purpose, to discuss the financial instability caused by certain non-compliant properties and to safeguard our community assets. It was a thinly veiled public ambush. Elara attended, slipping into the back of the community center. Delilah, dressed in a sharp power suit, stood at a podium with a glossy, professional PowerPoint presentation. "As you all know," Delilah began, her voice smooth and falsely concerned, "we have been forced to pursue legal remedies against the new owner of the Blackwood estate. This is a painful but necessary step. When outsiders come in and refuse to uphold our community standards, refusing to pay their fair share, it places an unfair burden on all of you." She showed a slide of Elara's beautifully restored home, labeling it financial liability. She subtly injected rumors, claiming Elara was planning to turn the historic home into a commercial architectural office, which would attract unnecessary traffic and fundamentally change the residential character of Willowbrook. She's good. She's not talking about the money anymore, she's talking about change and outsiders. She's weaponizing the community's natural suspicion of newcomers. She's trying to isolate me, to turn my neighbors into her chorus. The power of an HOA isn't just in the deed, it's in the social pressure, the fear of being marginalized. I have the legal papers, but if I don't win the community's trust, the papers won't save me. The community was divided. The newer HOA members, who paid their high dues without question, murmured nervously. But Elara noticed a small group of older residents, people who remembered Harold Peaton's heavy hand, exchanged discreet, meaningful glances. Delilah was ending her presentation, soliciting community support to move forward with the foreclosure. It was the moment Elara needed to act. She stood up slowly, calmly, and walked toward the front. "Mrs. Cross," Elara's voice was clear, cutting through the murmurs. "I believe you, Mr. Slide. The one where you detail the legal basis for your claim." Delilah turned, her fixed smile momentarily faltering. The Queen of Willowbrook had been challenged, publicly and directly, for the first time. Elara Vance had the legal document that could dismantle Delilah's entire claim. But that document was useless without an audience. In the next episode, the confrontation moves from the courthouse archives to the public stage. The community meeting is about to turn into a battleground, and Elara has just shown her opponent the first piece of her deadly evidence. The public challenge Elara Vance made at the town hall meeting, though brief, was the opening volley in what Delilah Cross knew would be a protracted war. Elara's question, demanding the legal basis for the HOA's claim, had planted a seed of doubt in the community. Delilah's response was swift, brutal, and utterly predictable. She escalated from financial intimidation to outright legal assault. 2 days after the town hall, Elara found a new document taped to her beautifully restored front door. It wasn't just a bill, it was a punishment designed to break her financially and psychologically. The paper was large, official, and bright red, a digital scarlet letter of non-compliance. The stated fines were staggering, $500 per day, retroactive to the first day of Elara's renovation, 8 months prior. The calculation section showed a running total of $122,000. $122,000. It's not a fine, it's a forced seizure. She's claiming I owe more than the cost of the materials I used to save the house. The absurdity of the charge, the audacity to fine a historical preservationist for restoring a landmark, was almost comical if it weren't so devastatingly effective. She knows I don't have this money. She knows this will force me to sell immediately, below market value, just to avoid bankruptcy. Delilah isn't a bully, she's a predator. The fine was based on the premise that Elara failed to submit her renovation plans to the HOA's non-existent Architectural Review Committee. The fine was legally bogus, given the Perpetual Exemption, but it served its purpose. It formalized the conflict, demanding a costly legal response. The harassment intensified daily. Delilah and her cronies began flooding the municipal planning office with anonymous complaints, noise violations, alleged unpermitted work on the well, and claims of improper storage of construction debris. Elara spent every afternoon waiting for a different inspector to drive up the gravel path. The inspectors, thankfully, found the same thing: Elara's work was flawless. Her permits were meticulously filed. Yet, the constant interruptions, the waste of time, and the psychological warfare were taking their toll. The peace of the Blackwood estate was utterly destroyed. Then came the legal punch that truly hurt. The HOA, through a connection at the county clerk's office, a favor likely called in by Delilah's husband's real estate firm, managed to file an actual lien against the property for the combined sum of the back dues and the new fines, totaling nearly $170,000. Elara's attorney, the newly retained Marcus Hale, found via a strong recommendation from Birdie, was furious. "It's a fraudulent lien, Elara, but it's filed," he explained over a frantic evening call. "Until we get a judge to throw it out, the property is frozen. You can't refinance, you can't get a business loan against the equity, and you can't sell. They have taken the house hostage." Elara realized the brilliance of the move. Delilah wasn't just trying to collect money, she was trying to cut off Elara's future, destroying her ability to launch her new architectural firm by tying up her only asset. It was this moment, staring out at the lake and feeling utterly helpless against the inertia of the local bureaucracy, that Elara finally broke. She felt the despair that had chased her since the divorce surge back. She had fought to regain control, only to have a petty tyrant snatch it away with a piece of paper. The next morning, Delilah abandoned all pretense of legal propriety. Elara walked out to her driveway and found her custom-built architectural design trailer, the one she had restored alongside the house, holding every essential, irreplaceable tool, vandalized. All 4 tires were slashed with deliberate malice. The windows were spiderwebbed with cracks. And across the pale grey exterior, spray-painted in thick, aggressive black letters, was a single word: outsider. The violation was profound. Elara filed a police report immediately, her voice shaking not from fear, but from cold, focused rage. The security camera Elara had installed, out of caution, not paranoia, captured the act. The figure was cloaked in a dark hoodie and hat, but the distinct build and gait strongly resembled Todd Peaton, Delilah's nervous, often-present nephew who worked as a general handyman for the HOA. The video didn't show the face, but it showed intent, a cold, methodical act of criminal destruction. This was the criminal line. The moment Delilah had overreached. "She thought this would scare me. She thought I'd pack up my ruined trailer and run. But I'm an architect. I don't run from structural collapse, I analyze it, stabilize it, and rebuild stronger. This vandalism isn't a setback, it's evidence. It proves malice, intent, and a pattern of criminal behavior. Delilah just gave me the human face of her corporate tyranny." The vandalism shocked the neutral neighbors, providing the public leverage Elara desperately needed. The first person to reach out was Jenny Castellano, a young, tenacious reporter from the Willowbrook Sentinel newspaper. Jenny had been watching the HOA situation for months, smelling a bigger story than just a neighborhood spat. She arrived with her camera, taking pictures of the slashed tires. "This is not a property dispute, Ms. Vance," Jenny stated, her voice tight with professional anger. "This is systemic abuse. Delilah has done this to 3 other people in the last 5 years, forcing them to sell low. But none of them had the documentation you do." Jenny revealed her own research. Delilah's husband's real estate firm often ended up buying the homes that were forced into foreclosure or quick sale due to overwhelming HOA liens. It wasn't just about control, it was a lucrative land grab disguised as community governance. The final piece of the alliance fell into place later that evening when Birdie arrived, carrying a thick, mouldering cardboard box. Harold Peaton was thorough, but he was messy, Birdie announced, spreading out brittle papers on Elara's kitchen island. He tried to hide the perpetual exemption. But what he didn't realize is that your Aunt Cordelia was just as meticulous. Birdie pulled out a thin, yellowed sheet, a notarized affidavit dated 1978. It was signed by Cordelia Blackwood. The affidavit didn't mention the exemption. Instead, it detailed the financial irregularities Birdie had hinted at, how Harold Peaton, Delilah's father, had used the initial HOA formation to shield personal assets and improperly move funds from the HOA treasury to bail out his failing construction business in the late 1970s. The document laid out a clear motive for why Harold signed the exemption: to buy Cordelia's silence regarding his financial crimes. Cordelia filed this in a safety deposit box as insurance, Birdie explained. A notarized, sworn statement of financial fraud, referenced only by the date of the preservation agreement. Delilah doesn't know this exists. If you expose this, you don't just win the house. You destroy the entire Peaton financial legacy in this town. Elara looked at the document, then at the photo of her ruined trailer. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical clarity. She had the facts, the evidence of criminal intent, the key to the financial corruption, and now, the perfect partner in the local press. The fight was no longer defensive. It was time to go on the offensive. The destruction of Elara's architectural trailer was not a defeat, it was the psychological and legal gift Delilah Cross unwittingly delivered. The vandalism, confirmed by the grainy but identifiable footage of Todd Peaton, transformed the civil property dispute into a matter of criminal harassment. This shift gave Elara's team, now a true, multifaceted alliance, the moral high ground and the legal leverage they desperately needed. The Blackwood Estate's newly restored library, which smelled of old cedar and fresh varnish, became the official war room. Around a large, antique mahogany table, Elara, Birdie, Marcus Hale, the attorney, and Jenny Castellano, the investigative reporter, spread out their documents. The atmosphere was intensely focused, charged with the energy of professionals ready to dismantle corruption. Birdie Kowalski, the archivist, was the bedrock. She had copies of the Perpetual Exemption, filed in 1978 under historical zoning, and the damning Cordelia Blackwood affidavit, detailing Harold Peaton's financial irregularities. Her knowledge provided the motive and the means of the Peatons' control. Marcus Hale, the young attorney, was the tactical commander. He was aggressive, sharp, and relished the chance to expose small-town corruption. His job was to formalize the counterattack, ensuring the paperwork was impeccable and irrefutable. Jenny Castellano, the reporter, was the voice of truth. Her role was crucial. She would bypass the slow-moving courts and try the Peaton family in the court of public opinion, where Delilah's reputation was her weakest flank. Delilah is currently relying on two things, Marcus explained, using a red marker to circle the enormous fine amount on a copy of the HOA's lien. First, that the fraudulent lien will panic Elara into a fire sale. Second, that the community will accept her word that the Blackwood Estate's documents are lost or forged. I had spent my life studying how structures fail. Wood rots, foundations crack, but they always leave a trace. Delilah's structure of power is just as fragile. Her foundation is built on decades of deceit, Harold Peaton's financial fraud, and secrecy, the buried exemption. The vandalism was her panic button, a sign of the structure starting to shake. My job now is not to defend, but to find the precise, load-bearing support she depends on, and take it out. Elara led the discussion, her architectural training allowing her to structure the plan with chilling precision. They agreed on a three-phase operation, timed to minimize Delilah's ability to counter. Phase 1, the legal strike, Marcus's role. We hit her with irrefutable fact first, Elara stated. Marcus, you will file a motion to quash and dismiss the lien with the county court. The key is to attach the certified copy of the 1978 Perpetual Exemption. This doesn't just argue she's wrong, it proves her filing is fundamentally fraudulent and malicious. Marcus nodded, his eyes gleaming. The moment we file, we include the motion for an emergency hearing. The filing freezes her ability to pursue foreclosure. And more importantly, the filing publicly enters the exemption document into the legal record. She can never claim it's missing again. They decided to wait 3 days after filing the motion before informing Delilah, giving them a small window to deploy the next phase. Phase 2, the media expose, Jenny's role. This is the psychological hit, Jenny explained, tapping the Cordelia affidavit. We aren't focusing on Elara's house. We are focusing on the legacy of corruption, how Harold Peaton used the original HOA as a piggy bank to save his failing construction firm. We use the affidavit as the core evidence. Jenny's headline idea was aggressive, HOA or Peaton Family Bank. How 50 years of Willowbrook dues paid for one family's fortune. The article would be timed to publish online and in print the morning Delilah receives the court summons for the motion to dismiss. The media exposure would crush her public standing and embarrass her husband's real estate firm, putting immense external pressure on her to settle. Phase 3, the public verdict, Birdie and Elara's role. The community is waiting for proof, Birdie insisted. They're tired of the fines, but they're still afraid. We need to show them the full, documented truth. Elara agreed. The final step would be an emergency community meeting, not run by the HOA, but by the citizens who demanded accountability. Elara would present the two documents side by side, the Perpetual Exemption, proving the fraud against Elara, and the Cordelia affidavit, proving the historical fraud against the entire community. The goal, Elara concluded, looking at her team, is not just to save the Blackwood estate. The goal is to collapse the Willowbrook estate's HOA entirely, permanently invalidating its control over the community. The tension mounted as Marcus prepared the final court documents. Elara ensured every piece of evidence was meticulously labeled: the 1978 exemption, the 1975 exclusion, the $122,000 fine notice, and the police report detailing the trailer vandalism. The latter was crucial, framing Delilah's actions as criminal overreach. Marcus filed the motion precisely at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, an hour chosen specifically to ensure the documents hit Delilah's desk right as her business day was ramping up. That afternoon, Elara and Birdie stood on the porch, watching the calm surface of the lake. Elara held a final check of the security footage, the one showing Todd Peaton's distinctive walk near the trailer. "You know, Elara," Birdie said quietly, adjusting her glasses, "this isn't about property anymore. This is about legacy. Delilah thinks power is something you inherit. You're proving that power is something you earn, with integrity and meticulous documentation." Elara nodded, the weariness of the past month giving way to a quiet resolve. The documents are filed, the article is written. The structure is set for collapse. Now, we wait for the reaction. The waiting was the hardest part, a moment of stillness just before the massive, inevitable reaction from the Peaton Empire. They had launched their guided missile, now they had to brace for the shockwave. The legal bomb had been dropped, but the fuse was still burning. Delilah Cross, blinded by arrogance and a belief in her own immunity, was about to receive a court summons proving her family's decades-old deception. The next move would be hers, and Elara knew that a cornered tyrant is always the most dangerous opponent. The media firestorm was next. The 3-day silence following the filing of the motion to quash and dismiss was a deceptive calm before the full, brutal force of the storm. Elara, Birdie, and Marcus knew the court summons, accompanied by the certified copy of the 1978 Perpetual Exemption, was a direct, undeniable challenge to Delilah Cross's decades of inherited authority. They waited, not with fear, but with the controlled anticipation of engineers observing a planned demolition. Delilah's reaction was exactly what they had hoped for: blind, furious overreaction, devoid of any measured legal strategy. When the court messenger delivered the bulky manila envelope to the HOA office, which, ironically, was located in the back corner of her husband's real estate agency, Delilah didn't bother to read Marcus's meticulously crafted motion. Her eyes zeroed in on the certified copy of the exemption document, signed by her father, Harold Peaton. Delilah retreated to her husband's private office, the sound of her ensuing tirade muffled only slightly by the thick mahogany door. For 50 years, the Peaton name had been synonymous with control in Willowbrook. The HOA was not a committee, it was her personal instrument of social order. To see her own father's signature, the architect of her power, used as the very instrument of her undoing was a psychological shockwave. She immediately counterfiled, an act of sheer legal desperation. Ignoring the advice of her increasingly panicked attorney, she claimed that the 1978 exemption was a forgery and that Cordelia Blackwood, Elara's great-aunt, was a known eccentric who operated under extreme mental duress. In doing so, Delilah committed her biggest tactical blunder. She doubled down on a lie in an official court record, opening the door for Elara to introduce the damning Cordelia affidavit, the sworn statement detailing the financial fraud, in the subsequent hearing. "They can't beat me. They are playing with paper. I control the institution. This woman, this failed architect with her pathetic little divorce settlement, thinks she can dismantle a 50-year legacy. The people here obey me. They fear me. They will believe that exemption is fake because they want to believe the HOA is fair. I will ruin her house, her reputation, and her life. I am Delilah Cross. I run this town. The very next morning, as Delilah was still attempting to mitigate the damage from her rash court filing, Phase 2 hit. The Willowbrook Sentinel, the town's only local paper, read religiously over coffee at every lake house, carried Jenny Castellano's exposé. The headline, screaming from the front page above the fold, was impossible to ignore: HOA or Peaton Family Bank. How 50 years of Willowbrook dues paid for one family's fortune. The article was a masterpiece of controlled, documented outrage. It systematically laid out the pattern, detailed accounts from previous HOA targets, elderly residents fined for minor infractions, newcomers driven out by crippling liens. The financial core, quoting the Cordelia affidavit without revealing the full document, Jenny highlighted the suspicious movement of $68,000 from the HOA Reserve Fund to Harold Peaton's private construction business in 1979. She framed the HOA not as a volunteer organization, but as a family enterprise for asset protection. The vandalism, while naming no names, the article referenced the police report filed over the deliberate criminal destruction of property, subtly linking the HOA's aggressive legal tactics to violence. The effect was instantaneous and explosive. In the quiet, usually passive community of Willowbrook, a palpable social rupture occurred. The phone lines at Delilah's husband's real estate office, her unofficial headquarters, were jammed. The younger, wealthier members who had been paying $350 monthly dues for years were livid that their money might have serviced a long-dead construction firm's debt. The older residents, who had quietly tolerated Delilah's control out of habit, suddenly found validation for decades of suppressed resentment. Elara and Birdie watched the drama unfold from the safety of the Blackwood porch. They saw neighbors, usually cordial but distant, driving by slowly, giving tentative waves and even flashing quick thumbs-up signs. The fear was visibly receding, replaced by a collective, burning anger. The biggest sign of Delilah's complete loss of control came later that afternoon. Elara witnessed a furious altercation outside the community post office. Todd Peaton, Delilah's nephew, the trailer vandal, was publicly confronted by Mr. Jenkins, an elderly homeowner known for his silence. Jenkins, shaking with righteous indignation, pointed to the newspaper and demanded to know where his $500 fine money had truly gone. Todd, panicked and clearly out of his element without Delilah's protection, sped away, abandoning his duties as the unofficial HOA enforcer. This is the true power of transparency. Delilah operated in the dark, using paper and whispers. When the sunlight of truth hits corruption, it shrivels instantly. The community didn't need a lawyer to convince them, they needed a journalist to give them the documented proof they already suspected. My victory isn't about the exemption anymore. It's about the fact that I gave these people back their voice, and they are using it to dismantle their own oppression. The final domino of the episode concerned the police report. Marcus and Jenny had worked together to ensure the local district attorney's office received a copy of the security footage alongside the court motion. The sight of the fraudulent lien, combined with documented criminal activity, the vandalism, was too much for the DA to ignore. A detective, a large, quiet man named Detective Miller, arrived at Delilah's opulent lakefront mansion. The interrogation was conducted in her driveway, loud enough to be noticed by the neighbors who were still reeling from the newspaper article. Though Delilah wasn't arrested, the DA was cautious about wading into a messy civil war. The visual of the HOA president being publicly questioned by law enforcement shattered the final remnants of her untouchable facade. Delilah, who prided herself on her image of flawless, expensive perfection, was seen yelling into her phone, her blonde bob must, her composure utterly, brutally ruined. Delilah felt the foundation beneath her life crumbling. Her husband, whose real estate business was now being publicly linked to HOA fraud, was threatening to pull her funding. Her carefully constructed network of socialites and golf partners was suddenly unavailable. She had fought Elara Vance with intimidation, and Elara had fought back with documentation, truth, and community consensus. Delilah was isolated, cornered, and legally exposed. Elara received a call that evening from her lawyer, Marcus. "She's panicking, Elara." She counterfiled an appeal, but it's a delay tactic. The pressure is too immense. She's bleeding socially and financially. We've won the war of public opinion. Now, we prepare for the final, formal execution. The final execution was Phase 3, the town hall verdict. Elara looked out at the tranquil lake, the only sound the soft lap of the water. She was an architect who had just witnessed the successful implosion of a structurally unsound building. The building was gone, but the site was messy. She still needed to clear the rubble and set the new foundation. Delilah's reign was over, not with a whisper, but with the roar of public accountability. The HOA was mortally wounded, its reputation destroyed. But the final act remained, the public, formal dissolution of the power structure, the final reading of the truth before the community that had been manipulated for 50 years. In the next episode, Elara will present the entire documented case to the town, delivering the final, definitive verdict on the Peaton legacy. The evening of the emergency community meeting, Phase 3 of Elara's counterattack, felt less like a small-town gathering and more like a pivotal moment in history. The meeting wasn't held in the sterile community center, but in the old, grand, but seldom-used Willowbrook Town Hall, a location chosen specifically by Bertie Kowalski for its symbolism of true democratic governance. The room was packed. Every seat was taken, and people spilled into the aisles and out the back doors. The atmosphere was charged with collective resentment, fueled by Jenny Castellano's newspaper expose and the visible downfall of Delilah Cross. Delilah, however, was not one to surrender quietly. She arrived late, flanked by her 2 remaining board members and her nervous-looking husband. She attempted to seize the podium, her voice sharp and ringing with practiced authority. "This gathering is unauthorized and illegal," Delilah announced, her composure strained but present. "The proper forum for these discussions is the HOA board. This is merely a slanderous attempt by an outsider to disrupt 50 years of community order." The crowd, however, did not flinch. Mr. Jenkins, the elderly man who had confronted Todd Peaton, stood up and pointed toward the back door. "Your order is built on our money, Delilah. We are the community, and we authorize this meeting. Now sit down and listen to the evidence." The collective defiance was a blow Delilah could not recover from. The fear she had expertly cultivated for decades had evaporated. She sat down, her face pale with fury, watching as Marcus Hale, Elara's attorney, took the podium. Marcus began, not with aggression, but with calm, methodical legal clarity, addressing the community as if they were the jury. He presented the 2 key pieces of documentation, projected onto a large screen behind him. "The first piece of evidence," Marcus stated, his voice ringing across the hall, "proves the HOA's claim against the Blackwood estate is entirely fraudulent." He displayed the certified copy of the 1978 Perpetual Exemption status signed by Harold Peaton. He explained its filing under the obscure historical zoning category. He then displayed Delilah's subsequent court filing, where she had declared the document a forgery. "By declaring this certified document a forgery," Marcus continued, "Mrs. Cross not only committed fraud upon the court but also publicly lied to you, the community, whom she swore to serve." Elara then walked to the podium. She didn't speak about the fine, she spoke about the broken trust. "I am an architect. I respect foundations. When I restore a house, I dig down to the bedrock. When Delilah filed a $170,000 lien against my house, she assumed I would only fight to save my home. She didn't realize I would fight to expose her entire, rotting foundation." The entire hall fell silent when Marcus introduced the second document, the Cordelia Blackwood affidavit. "This document," Marcus declared, holding up the original, now yellowed paper, explains the motive behind the lie. He then read the core passage, detailing how Harold Peaton, Delilah's father, had secretly funneled $68,000 from the HOA's starting fund in 1979 to prop up his failing construction business. "The HOA was never about community standards," Marcus concluded. "It was a decades-long financial scheme. The Perpetual Exemption was the price Harold Peaton paid to by Mrs. Blackwood's silence regarding his criminal financial misconduct." The realization hit the room like a physical shockwave. 50 years of fees, fines, and servitude, all rooted in a criminal act of embezzlement committed by the Peaton patriarch. As the community erupted in anger, Delilah Cross rose from her seat, her face a mask of white-hot rage. "This is slander. Vengeance," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Elara. "That woman vandalized her own property for sympathy. She is a bankrupt liar. We will sue you all for defamation. The HOA is the only thing protecting your property values." Her husband, seeing his real estate career collapse in real time, tried to pull her down, but Delilah pushed him away, fully exposed and unhinged. It was Bertie Kowalski who delivered the final, quiet blow. She walked up to the podium and gently took the microphone from Elara. "I have served this community for 50 years, Bertie said, her voice soft but steady. "I remember when Harold Peaton formed this club. I remember Cordelia Blackwood fighting him. I remember your arrogance, Delilah, and your father's greed." Bertie looked directly at Delilah. You call Elara an outsider. But she brought us the truth. You, Delilah, are the only outsider here. You stole our money, and you stole our dignity. And tonight, we take it back. Birdie held up a stack of pre-signed petitions. Over 3/4 of the members have signed the petition to immediately dissolve the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. The lien is quashed. The HOA is terminated. The moment Birdie dropped the stack of petitions onto the podium, the town hall erupted in applause, cheers, and shouts of relief. Delilah Cross, finally realizing the totality of her loss, turned and fled the building, her polished image shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Her husband and her 2 remaining cronies followed, dissolving into the night. The next few weeks were a flurry of legal cleanup. The court swiftly ruled in Elara's favor, formally quashing the fraudulent lien and permanently dismissing the entire $170,000 claim based on the undeniable evidence of the Perpetual Exemption and Delilah's fraudulent counterfiling. The district attorney's office, armed with the evidence of Todd Peaton's vandalism and the affidavit detailing Harold Peaton's historical fraud, opened a full investigation into the Peaton family's assets, ensuring that Delilah's power was irrevocably neutralized. Elara Vance finally achieved the goal she had sought from the beginning: peace. She stood on her wraparound porch once more, coffee steam curling in the morning air, watching the soft mist lift from the lake. The smells of fresh paint, pine, and lake water were back, this time accompanied by the scent of victory and freedom. The Blackwood estate is more than just wood and mortar. It's a monument to the fact that even the most meticulously planned structure can be threatened by the most irrational human chaos. But chaos can be overcome by structure. Delilah relied on fear and secrecy. I relied on documentation and community. The best renovation I performed here wasn't on the house, it was helping this community rebuild its own foundation, replacing the rot of tyranny with the solid bedrock of truth. My great-aunt Cordelia didn't just leave me a house, she left me the key to defeating the bully who tried to take it. And now, the Blackwood estate truly is a sanctuary. The victory was complete. Elara Vance was no longer just the woman who restored the beautiful old house, she was the architect who helped tear down the reign of the Peatons. The sound of loons calling across the water reminds me that some things are worth fighting to preserve. The smell of wood smoke from backyard fire pits mixes with honeysuckle, creating the perfect soundtrack for a community that learned to choose cooperation over control. The legal battle taught me something invaluable. Thorough property research, documented evidence, and community alliances can defeat even the most entrenched bullies. Property records don't lie, but people who profit from intimidation certainly do. Sometimes the best weapon against systematic harassment is simply refusing to be silently victimized. Speaking of refusing to be victimized, wait until you hear what happened when my neighbor Marcus bought that old farmhouse where the previous owners claimed there was a ghost clause in the deed requiring monthly census. Seriously, you can't make this stuff up. Here's what I need from you. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA or property management nightmare. Some of these stories are so outrageous they could power their own episodes. And if you're hungry for more tales of ordinary people using research, determination, and community support to demolish impossible odds, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for HOA tales, because we're just getting started exposing the petty tyrants who think they can push people around. Sometimes the best renovation isn't what you do to a building. It's what you do to the bullies who try to tear it down.